looking for help from us, because, teachers for choice and doctors for choice, and teachers did not stand up for their students. There was basically no support from the teachers. And in fact, there was a lot of, I don't want to work with kids that aren't vaccinated against the measles, right? So now that, and I'm not trying to be spiteful, but what I'm saying is that no one cared about the kids. No one cared about the mothers who were telling people their stories. No one cared. And now that it affects people, now that they're not going to be able to make a living, and their world is going to be turned upside down, and they need to make a drastic choice, right? Am I going to continue to work in NYC? My pension? They have all these questions. Well, their pensions mattered so much that's part of the reason they didn't support the children, is because a lot of their pensions are tied up in pharmaceuticals. So they made that big choice, right? That choice to choose their pension and money over the well-being and health of children, the next generation, who these people are supposed to care about, because they're educating, right? They spend 6 to 8 hours with these children a day, and yet you didn't get much out of a lot of teachers. And I can speak from on a personal level, because my son was kicked out of school. Same thing with doctors and nurses. I mean, you have to think to yourself, these people want choice, right? They're upset about COVID-19 being mandated, yet how many babies do they injure and kill on a daily without feeling a thing, right? And then when those parents,
or label us, right?
Yeah, anti-vaxxers, just because we want to tell our story about how our children suffered reactions or were injured, from a vaccine. So, maybe when you hear this whole Great Awakening thing, right? That Q pushes, maybe some people are forced to deal with the reality that they were hiding before for their own, personal gain. Now those people are being exposed. Are vaccines really safe? If they're so safe, then why do you need choice? Mm-hmm. You've been pushing them on children all these years.
Specifically to pay for injuries caused by vaccines.
Yep.
Right.
You're
quite aware now.
Why did the CDC conduct their own assessment of their own vaccine adverse events report system, discover that it only gathered 1% of the actual injuries, and do nothing about it? What company would use something to track injuries and adverse events, find out that it's only 1% effective? What piece of garbage company would ever do that and still be in business?
Absolutely.
Can I speak to that for 1 second? Not to interrupt you guys.
Yes,
I think Tank, you and I actually discussed this the other day. A lot of people in other states are like, oh my gosh, New York is burning down. Their governors talking about mandating this for all. Absolutely. The trade centers here, we have Wall Street, like we are the international footprint, and California is the footprint in regards to Silicon Valley and technology. And these two states really, really try to push how the rest of the U.S. and even surrounding countries at this point, fit into this mold. So I think something that is really missed here is that, the FDA call the other day is a panel of experts. There's international interest there that is clearly on the phone. You can see people really upset, leaving messages, chiming in that the U.S. should be really only voting on the U.S. as to what it is. Just because this is for emergency use and it's not about mandating, there is a order of operation with everything. FDA has to clear something in order for the CDC to say, hey, we've got the backing of the FDA. We're in bed together, CDC and FDA. CDC and FDA are also giving the go to all the doctors that have the incentives to pushing this. Whether the vaccine is free or not, there's still the money at the end game that comes out down the top to bottom effect. So I know Tom had said earlier in the call that, this, you still have a choice, this is not about mandating when, just because it's, well, no. See, what is happening, though, is that now the FDA and the CDC have gotten the go. This now gives the green light to all the states that have pending bills about mandating if they don't meet immunity threshold. Mm-hmm. Now, that is the clear opening of the door for the fight for all of us to have to fight even harder now, because it wasn't stopped at the FDA and it wasn't stopped at the CDC. So when everybody is like, well, we're not really in quite a position that New York's in, no, you might not be, but I'm telling you now, this is going to go to a federal level if somebody like Joe Biden is sitting in seat, or if China gets what they want. China is heavily invested in Western states right now. So I really highly suggest every assembly or prospective assembly that's trying to form right now, look into your local investments and your big businesses within your states. Are you great for oil in your state? Is your state great for minerals? Look at these companies that are investing or heavily owned stocks, because I'm going to 100% bet that it's China. And you as an assembly, a state assembly, can address that. You can kick them out. You can absolutely shut their money off. You can go after them for aiding the enemy. There's a ton of U.S. codes that apply to this. This is where the assembly work gets done. You have to look at where the money is in the U.S. We have to clean China out now, and it is part of the people's responsibility. It's not just Life Force's responsibility as enforcement. The people have to do the actual groundwork as to where China has its sticky fingers in, because these aren't people above us that are just dealing with this like the military. It's already leaked into our systems here in the U.S. And this is what Trump was talking about, cleaning up the swamp. But obviously, as a president, he can only do so much on the local levels, local assemblies, state assemblies. We have to start looking at the international interest within our states and looking at where the heavy money holders are. And this is where you can start serving these folks. And with that, I yield.
Now, Bill, I asked you to unmute there. You have to press *6. I don't know if you can. Speak.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Hey, Bill. So, why don't you tell everybody who you are, or whatever you want people to know about you?
Certainly. My name is Bill Giroux. I'm an attorney that I've had the pleasure of working with Tom for many years now. And I was talking to him about the situation, and I've had the pleasure of being on calls with Dr. Corsi and trying to talk to everybody about some of my thoughts on what's going on in the Supreme Court, and how they're not taking it. It was contrary to everything that the Supreme Court is supposed to do and not do. Matter of fact, as far back as 1821, the Supreme Court said it's treason to the Constitution to not take jurisdiction where they should, or treason where they take it and they should not. And that's Cohen v. Virginia. And then in 1980, the Supreme Court again followed that in U.S. v. Will. And so I agree with Justice Alito when he says we should have taken the case. Now, what I also brought up, though, was who can then have jurisdiction? I know that Dr. Corsi filed his own documentation, and I'm very impressed with the fact that the assemblies that now represent the state of New York, which are not the corporate New York that is overseeing all of us, is the true representative of the sovereign people of New York. And I was hoping that perhaps they could make their own application to the Supreme Court, which would, of course, either get them recognition or slap down immediately, but it would give you a place to say, we are being harmed by this. And keep it simple. The law is simple. The Constitution says that they must follow state law for an election. And the state law they're referring to very specifically is that of the legislature, not any executive orders, not somebody who's in charge of a particular electoral district or anything else. They're talking specifically to the legislature. If they didn't change the law in this particular case to handle mail-in ballots, then all of the mail-in ballots, in my estimation, would have been void from their writing, void ab initio under the law. And if they're not there, then we can't then, if you're using the corporate setup of the United States and New York, send someone to the Electoral College. You can't submit someone there. And if there can't be an elector sent there, well, then the only thing the Supreme Court could do is direct the election for president to the House of Representatives for the president and to the Senate for the vice president. The nice thing about using the House of Representatives is that only one person from each state can vote in the House. And according to Dr. Corsi, as well as the ex-Attorney General of Florida, Pamela Bondi, states, the law is that a Republican result is the only thing that can occur under those circumstances. So I'd like to see either individuals or I'd like to see the assembly, not necessarily of of Life Force, but of New York, make such an application and see where they stand. And if they have people that are doing that for them, a law firm, I'd be glad to give my input to them as they create that. And I don't know any other state that wants to do it, because each state has the same problem. There are a few that did have legislatures that allowed for mail-in ballots. Most did not. Therefore, all the electors and all the elected college will fail. Go ahead.
Bill, so, excuse me, Brad, I'm going to interrupt you there, but, okay, so there's a couple things here, right? One, by the nature of using an attorney, we immediately turn over our ability to represent ourselves. So I would say, in general, the assemblies are not going to participate, and I would not recommend that at all, because as soon as we do that, we lose our power and we enter into a completely different court of authority. My question to you is this. Now, even Justice Scalia acknowledged the authority of the grand juries, right? The de jure grand juries, they hold a place all by themselves, which is actually, no one can counteract the decisions made by the grand jury. The problem that I see is we have clear, irrefutable evidence across the board constantly that no one is enforcing. Certainly no one. The Bar Association somehow has jurisdiction, they think, in New York, right? The Bar Association came together in New York. They voted to mandate vaccines, and apparently that's what they're going to do. Why on earth do these groups think they have that authority? Is it solely because people haven't stepped up?
They can't do it. They can't do it. The United States can't do it. Nobody can do it, because guess what? If they're following all the old law under treaties which supersede U.S. and state law, the Nuremberg codes forbid forcing vaccines upon us without having full knowledge of the medical treatment, i.e. informed consent. And here there's no proper testing, and no one can make that information available to us. Therefore, under the Nuremberg Code, nobody has the authority to force that upon anyone in the New York State or the country.
So based on that, right? So we can also implement here very obvious oversteps and overreach of the de facto government, right? Because you could take jurisprudence 177, section 2, right? What is it, 16 jurisprudence 177, section 2, where it says no code, statute, order, or mandate presenting itself as a law is in fact a law if it violates the fundamental rights of the people. It is therefore a no law. And because it's a no law, no one has to abide by it, and no one can enforce it. So here, in addition to all of these other crimes, you have fines being levied against schools, $2,000 a day if they try to send a child in without a vaccine for the measles, right? And I mean, that was happening 2 years ago. So with things like that are such an obvious overstep and such an obvious violation of law, it's really essential, I would think, at this point, for the assemblies to step into place to hold the government responsible. Is that fair to say, you think?
So how are you going to stop them or enforce them? Because where is the enforcement ability? So you can have the grand jury say that a crime is had, and you can hold your own court, and you can issue a decision. How are you enforcing that now? And who are you then talking to? Corporate United States, corporate New York? Who are you talking to? And who's going to make the arrest and stop them before they break the law?
Yeah, so we actually are